So everyone in this group at the moment, I have met either maybe for a small moment or for extended years, and but each interaction for me has been quite well. It kind of resonated with myself, and each individual here has kind of stayed with me in my thoughts, and that's why I thought it was nice to come along and have a little chat about this project. So with Danny, we've been friends from about 16, 17 years old. And uh, I went off for dance, he went off into acting. And then we found that we've shared a passion in Robert Wedderburn's story, and we didn't realize. So that kind of got us reconnected again. Well, we've always been connected, but kind of creating again. So Danny, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hello, I'm Danny Sapani. As Peter said, we've known each other for many years, and as he said, I'm an actor, and I became slightly fascinated by by Robert Wedderburn's life after reading Peter Fryer's book, which is called the history of Black Britons. No, Staying Power.
Staying Power, yeah.
And Robert Wedderburn and many other people's life. And around the period that Robert lived, there was a sort of, the beginning of the abolitionist movement, and then we sort of move into the Chartist movement of the early 1800s, and so and he's sort of influential in both of those movements. But what sort of made me kind of look at him more closely than, say, Olaudah Equiano or Ottapa Cugoano or Ignatius Sancho or any of those other sort of abolitionist movement sort of giants was his connection to the kind of labour movement in Britain as well. And the fact that he lived in Seven Dials. I was just completely blown away by this, and indeed by learning so much about sort of Black Britons around this period of time that I knew nothing about prior to reading Peter's book. So I was in the process of trying to sort of dramatize his life in some way, which I've sort of been trying to do over for the last 2 or 3 years, and I haven't really made any headway with that because I'm not a writer, and so the main thing was to try and find other people who were interested in it, and so I'm still sort of pushing ahead with that, either a play or a TV series, or and then hopefully consequently lots of other people from that time up until the present day who have had some sort of influence on sort of British politics, that forgotten stories. So and then when I met with Peter, and he'd already put together a piece dramatizing Robert's life through dance and music and story, I sort of reignited my sort of enthusiasm and energy. And so we currently are talking about how we can find different ways to collaborate that and make something together. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on Robert's life, but I've got a timeline, and I've put lots of different aspects together, and I'm very interested to meet with you all and to find out more.
Great. Well, thanks, Danny. And I don't have COVID, so everyone's safe. I've had the test, and I'm negative. It's the most positive thing I've heard for a long time, that I'm negative. But so David was. I met him doing a podcast when I was had my business hat on. And when I met David, his history about his influence on Black culture in Britain was so inspiring. I thought it'd be wonderful for him to engage with us in this conversation. And also, it's one of the things about Robert Wedderburn. He was such a political activist of that time, and fighting against the oppressions of that time, and trying to fight for the rights of slaves and the rights of the poor. And these same fights may have a different kind of feel to them today, but there's still this sense of going against sometimes an unseen kind of power out there, and how to navigate through there. So I thought it'd be interesting to see David's kind of, if you could tell us a little bit about your experience in this world.
So my inexperience as well probably goes back a long way. So I was just checking dates, because you kind of forget at my age when when you begin to sort of when you got engaged in this. So my involvement in community campaigns for justice and the positive treatment of Black people dates back to 1970.
That's my birth. That's when I was born.
As I said, it dates back a long way. So at that point, I was involved in community campaigns about challenging police excesses, and I went to a comprehensive in South London where we were a significant part of the population was Black, and we developed our own program of self-learning, Black Studies program. That then led me and a group of other folk to open not the first bookshop in Brixton, but the second. The first one was burnt down in the early 70s in a race riot. The one we opened up subsequently opened in 1976. So the issue of Black books, Black stories, Black history as part of a wider cultural history that isn't told appropriately, I think, is something I've been very passionate to all along the line, because I think the worlds in which we operate interlink, and the stories don't make any sense if we tell them in fragments. We get insights into individual lives, but really we need to tell the whole picture more coherently. So I've been doing this for, as you can see, a while. Behind me are some of the books. It's not a screensaver. It's some of the books I certainly thought it was imperative to make sure that I held on to in those layers, and I've continued, unfortunately, to have a modest addiction to buying books. I've got more books than I'll ever be able to read in this lifetime, but I know that books about Black characters are rarely retained in bookshops. They are published on a small run, and after a short while they're gone. They barely even turn up on electronic books either. So it's crucial, in my view, that one can lay hands on them. What do I do now? I'm chair now of two organizations in particular, I think relevant to this, maybe three. One is Voluntary Arts, a national organization that encourages local people to become engaged in the arts, and therefore do it out of love as opposed to money. I think the whole of the arts, most of the arts does it out of love as money, but this won't actually get paid nothing at all. But do it nonetheless in different communities. And I think, and because they do it in different communities across all 4 countries, they're working with local stories, local people. And I think that for me is very powerful, because it means that people come together to define their own existence and find their own stories. And that is crucial. The other 2 I chair are Battersea Arts Centre, and I'm now chair of what was Oval House Theatre, but we're now moving to Brixton, and where we're building a brand new, I don't know what to call it. It's not a theatre because we have 2 of those, but we also have 5 rehearsal rooms, bar, restaurant, offices. So it's quite a complex that will be opening up next year. And so you can see from 1970 to now, I've maintained a persistent commitment to the fact that stories of poor people, diverse communities, Black communities in particular in the UK, because race is a very difficult issue in the UK, don't get a proper airing. And therefore I've been keeping a consistent engagement in that terrain over the years.
Thank you very much. So yeah, it's I mean, what is also very interesting about the books is what I'm also finding, one of the reasons why I wanted to put this on, is that the access to the information, if you wanted to know about Black history, is sometimes the English is quite old, and it's not accessible sometimes. It's sometimes very academic, so it's not accessible in that form. I also find, like the book that Danny mentioned, Staying Power, I don't believe, as far as I can understand, there's not an audio version of that book. So when you don't have different types of medias to accent this type of history, you're limited to one learning platform, which already will be elitist in its own form. And so that's the idea of having conversations like this, putting stuff on YouTube, that there's more accessibility to different learning styles and people can get stories in the way that they want to digest them. So Clayton, I met him at a business event. I was facilitating entrepreneurs that are making an impression on our society. And Clayton I would almost say Clayton is the generation today, which is on the front line, inspiring people's potential to really grow into what their possibilities are. Clayton, would you like to introduce yourself a bit about what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Clayton Planton, founder of an organisation called Street to Boardroom. It's a CIC company. Basically, it works with people on the wrong side of the law or on the edge, disadvantaged people, trying to get them to start their own business or go into the corporate industry. Really, I started it really because I was frustrated with the system. I've kind of been kind of a person who kind of have a kind of, what can I say, different type of people I hang around with, always willing to learn. And I wanted to create something what different what could bring people together. I realized, as David was saying earlier, he's been fighting for like justice, equality for years. And I met many people like David, and I thought to myself, how can I do things differently? So what I decided to do is make quality and diversity more cool. And the way I done that is creating something called Street to Boardroom. Street to Boardroom talks about equality and it talks about inclusion. Obviously, street and boardroom meeting together, that's the inclusion. And then you've got the diversity of someone ethnic from an ethnic community and someone from a white community. Street to Boardroom is a 4 weeks course. It's a motivation course. So the first week we look at street versus the corporate business. So on the street side, you've got the product, the drugs. On the corporate side, you've got your product, the mobile phones. On the street side, you've got your crew. On the corporate side, you've got your team. On the street side, you've got your boss man. On the corporate side, you've got your manager. On the street side, you make money, lose money. On the corporate side, it's profit and loss. On the street side, you death or go to prison. And on the corporate side, you turn bankrupt or lose your job. The person on the risk is taking much more of a risk. And when I used to work in the corporate industry, I realized that if I change the roles around, put someone in the street in the corporate industry and someone from the corporate in the street person will always win every time. And the reason why that is because most corporate companies, you have a basic salary and then you make commission on top. In the street side, you either make money, lose money. So I thought to myself, how can I create something different, unique? So Street to Boardroom I've done it independent myself. We partnership with Avon Somerset Police, what's never been done before. So they work with me for 6 months and they don't get into trouble. They end up having no criminal record at all. We've also partnership with a recruitment company as well. And we've also, we're also looking to partner with NatWest Bank as well to kind of roll this out national. The reason why I kind of say about Street to Boardroom, because technically I'm Street to Boardroom. I didn't actually get involved in crime, but I came from a disadvantaged community. And I realized that people in the corporate industry was no smarter than me and my friends. And I realized to tackle this issue, I had to make diversity and inclusion very cool to be part of. A lot of people don't know that they're doing diversity and inclusion with me. They just look at the name Street to Boardroom and want to be part of it. But technically, I've answered all the questions what they thought about diversity and inclusion. And as David probably recognized, and a few of us know in this group, that when you talk about diversity, race, it's uncomfortable for many people. So I wanted to create in a cool way that you don't actually think that you're doing it. What's the plan for Street to Boardroom? We're trying to get Street to Boardroom on TV as the next apprentice. So we're looking into that at the moment. We're looking to do Street to Boardroom nationally across the UK. And we're looking to develop to Street to Boardroom as a board game as well. So really it's about bringing two worlds together. The funny thing about this is I get so many people not actually involved in crime what like Street to Boardroom because it's an underdog story as well. So maybe it's a lady trying to get into management. Maybe it's a homeless person trying to get the first job. Maybe someone from an ethnic background trying to go to the senior management position. Technically, it's just an underdog story. And I always started like this. So I go, imagine this. It's young people, adults who find themselves caught up in a range of legal activities could achieve greatness, giving them the knowledge and confidence to apply what they have learned from the streets to learn the legal hustle. It's not where you come from, it's where you're going, what's important. And I think for a lot of people, they can realize this. It's coming from nothing and achieving something great. So it, what I'm trying to say is all about just creating your own name and trying to do things differently. Because as David was saying before, we've been tackling this issue about diversity and quality and opportunities. And I realized that the only way we can do this is we do it in a cool way that people don't actually know that they're a part of it. And
Yeah,
basically,
yeah. Yeah, and there's something that what I was very interesting when I was going through the history about the diversity of London in the 1800s, and how I I was kind of familiar with it because of like Danny the staying power, but I didn't really understand the integration and also the power that ex-slaves and Africans were putting in to actually try and make a movement as well. It wasn't all about being a victim. They're trying to change the society with the abolitionists. And then suddenly that history just disappears. And then it starts from the Windrush suddenly. It's like somebody's just put a kind of full stop and said there was nothing going on then. It starts here, and then you from here you go on, and then it's like, hold up a second. People have been fighting not just for decades, but for hundreds of years about their identity and against oppression and the aristocracy, and how the poor class were being suppressed and how they had to overcome this. This is a continual battle as it's moving forward, and this kind of history reminds us that it's just not today that this is happening. This is going through generation after generation.
definitely. I think it's a different generation now. I think as you look at the young people now, young people don't really look at color. They're not really interested in color.
Yeah.
Most young people want to be part of something what's cool and something they can relate to.
Yeah.
And I think, to be honest, I think we're in a great time in the UK at the moment. One of the best times I've ever seen. I'm not saying I'm old, but I'm not saying I'm young, but it's definitely one of the great times. And I think because the young people ain't looking at color. So regardless you're against it or you buy it or you're against this or don't want change, I can guarantee change is 100% coming. And I think generally when I look at this now, we're in a great time. Definitely.
I think that's really interesting, because that's what they said in the 1800s, especially in the working class. Color wasn't an issue. It was your social status. It was maybe an issue in the higher class, but in the lower class, it was just everyone got down and just got on with it. So and Chioma, I just introduced Chioma as well. She joined the project, so she is multi-talented. She plays the violin, she sings, she does spoken word, she dances. She was even doing Merce Cunningham the other day. So and she's brought a wonderful flavor to the piece. So my co-director Mary Lou is like we danced together and we formed this, and we did this at first, and then she went to develop it even further, and then Chioma came in, and then we have also musician Louise as well, that is an oboe player. So we're mixing, we've got like a reggae beat at times with the oboe playing and then the violin coming on, and then we want to try and get it, because one of the things with Robert Wedderburn, what I understand, is he was a speaker that inspired an audience. And then when it's written down in English, Old English, because a lot of the spies were the ones that wrote the history, or some of their writers wrote it. So it wasn't him, how he expressed himself. So I'm trying to take, I suppose it's the shadows or behind the words, to try and find out what his essence, how did he inspire so many people by the way he spoke? So that was why it was very important for me to get someone like Chioma that can also, we put humor, we're a bit stupid in it. We don't take it so serious. Sometimes we do take it very seriously. So Chioma, do you want to share a little bit about your experience of did you know anything about Robert Wedderburn before, and what you feel about it now you started working on it, and your experience with that?
Well, hi everyone. This is the thing, like I'd never heard of Robert Wedderburn before, and I'd already been quite like novice in terms of knowing like Black history here, because I was born here. I have siblings. We were all born here. And again, I'm not Caribbean. I'm half Ghanaian, half Nigerian. So that's the thing. Like when it comes to the Windrush, which I've learned about myself. Of course, that's important. But I was thinking, but I live here, but that isn't technically my path either. I was thinking, I never really, and only until recently, I'd never really been taught about Black history from an academic point of view. So getting to hear about Robert Wedderburn and his activism, just his presence and his existence in that time, and being able to elevate it into a piece of work, be it like dance or music, spoken word, all these different like theatrical parts, like it's been something that I've been very touched by, and I've been very eager to bring whatever I can bring to it, because there's just no mention of it. And even if there is, it's especially when it comes down to October, because then it's like Black History Month. I'm thinking, okay, but even then, of course you have, I mean, we've all seen like the very performative Instagram trends and the hashtags, and that's kind of trickled through. But even throughout this month, from my experience, I've never really seen a deep or a really, I don't know, like a really deep investigation into like obscure Black history. It's more about the really important, like Mary Seacole, like they all come back and it's like, oh yeah, I remember her. Oh yeah, she did that, that, and that. So someone could tell you that, but yet in terms of the struggles or the very different micro situations that happen to people, both past and present, they're not really broadcast as much as I think they should be. And of course, I mean, the Black History Month is a good example of exposure and letting people know. But to have this show now is the best thing ever, because it means that you get to bring all of these amazing creative elements, and it stays. Like now that it exists, like it stays. It doesn't just go away. It's part of what we're talking about now, Black History Month, and anyone that wants to revisit it can. So I think I'm really happy to be part of it, but also just to expose someone that did so much in a time where so little was happening. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much. So that's a nice little kind of introduction to everyone. So I was just wondering, if everyone wants to jump in, or a little bit about how you feel the experiences of the past and this kind of washing out of history. Do you feel it makes a difference to you today, or is it just being present now? Does, like Henry Ford said, who needs to know about the past? Let's just get on and develop the future. Or do you also feel that's a sense of one's own empowerment is lost if a history isn't told, and just what your feeling behind that is?
I'll probably start. I always think that knowing is power. I think as much as it's important to not necessarily torture yourself with knowing every little detail about something, because sometimes that can drive you mad, and in that sense, I think in that times it can almost hold you back. But I think knowing, I think the idea of going into a situation, be it even like a job interview or a position or whatever, and not having the relevant knowledge that you need, I think it can be very troublesome when you like it's. I'm probably going to be babbling, so apologies in advance. I feel like knowing is power, and I feel like it's important to know your history, because the whole point of it is that you have the opportunity to learn from something that's happened before, and if it happened to have a bad consequence, you're able to learn from it and hope that you don't repeat it. So I think when you don't know about anything, you may be repeating something that you never even knew you were meant to. But that being said, I think sometimes I have got friends that only focus on, quote unquote, the negative side of history, or maybe the perspective that they cling to the most. And that can be for emotional reasons, but also I've seen how it can hold them back and how it can torment them. So I think knowing your history is important, but I think also in order to progress, knowing what's relevant in order to move on, and also to go forward in a very positive way, I think that's what I tend to focus on anyway. But I think it's also exciting to be able to discover people like Robert Wedderburn that I've never heard of, and yet they've unleashed and addressed so many things that are relevant to today. So I think I think it'd be crazy for me now to think that I may, if I never came across you guys now and you, Peter and Mary, like if I'd never been involved in this project, I could have probably, God's grace, if I live a long life and find out about Robert Wedderburn like 30 years on, let's say, and think, how did I never hear of this person? You know, and he's been addressing stuff that we're looking at now. So yeah, I think history is very important, but I think it's also important to know what you need to take from that to adapt and to grow and to be able to express and I think lead the way and be innovative, but with the right tools, I think, from the history that you may or may not have experienced. I think it's important.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone want to chip in to that at all about the power of knowledge of the past? Or
Well, Danny was about to speak. That's why I was.
No, Stephen, you're on mute. I can see you're moving your lips, but you're on mute.
Oh,
Okay.
who's
All right.
that?
So, shall I jump in?
Yeah.
Go on, Danny.
I think that
I could see Stephen moving his lips. I think he was speaking, but he was on mute. So I was just saying, give him a chance to speak.
okay. Sorry.
I think we'll go for David. David, if you
Yeah.
you're on vocal. So
Sorry, anyone. I was just noticed something. He was speaking.
Okay.
I didn't want to
Carry on.
decide.
Oh, wait for me.
yeah.
I without history, how do we learn? How do we learn not to make the same mistakes? And I'd love to think that we learn from our mistakes, and then we can look back through history and we can see patterns of behavior where certain circumstances have these knock-on effects. And I think without studying history, we're just kind of stumbling blind, aren't we, into the future. And it's a bit like parenting. Without having studied those past experiences, how do you educate your child? How do you tell your child, don't do that because you're going to hurt yourself? It's from experience. So everything comes from experience. And I just hope we can learn from those mistakes. But
yeah, I think one of the things why I found this question interesting myself is being of mixed heritage. There's one part of my family that's very easy to find. I can go back quite a few generations. And there's another part of my family that stops very quickly. And I don't know, and it's only because of DNA tests I know that I got a percentage of Nigerian at the moment, and then my great grandfather is Indian, and but I don't know anything about them, that because they're in the Jamaican slave trade type of area where that information. A lot of it's, unless you really have to go and hunt, even if you do, there may be dead ends everywhere. There's a part of my history that I can't access. So what does it mean for me to not be able to access my personal history in some areas, but still be motivated by the sprinkle of celebrity histories? So I was just curious about what it means to have a full history behind and not having a full history behind, and how that actually how that influences what you do in the present and what you move on with.
I think for me the issue is twofold. One is about how we define ourselves. I think that whole issue about self-identity is key to this, about the confidence we derive from it. But it's not, I think, in a kind of absolute state. It's not about, you get immersed in your culture and all of a sudden you are super. You've got all the knowledge of the past imbibed in your DNA, and therefore it helps you go forth. It's not so coherent. It's not so systematic. I think it's a great degree of we learning from our families and from those around us who pass on the aspects of the culture that we take on board. And it's a variety of nuances of the way we do things, the way we talk, the way we cook, the way we regard the world. It's not a kind of definitive encyclopedia of this is what we do, given our backgrounds, and given that so many backgrounds are really richly mixed, be they Nigerian, Ghana, be they Jamaican and Ghanaian, be be they St. Lucia and St. Kitts. We have a variety of mix already in our communities, as well as across the European mix. I always get that. I always find that notion of being mixed race somewhat bizarre as a concept, because it only refers to black and white. We don't talk about mixes across the continent of Africa or the Caribbean islands. I mean, and those. And if you've been to the Caribbean islands, you can start in Jamaica and go into, St. Lucia or further along the East Coast and Trinidad, and they're asking where you're coming from, and have you got mango in where you're coming from? I mean, there's a bizarre range of differences that can exist, but the presumption is we're the same. I think that's part of the flaw. The other part of the issue is about the bigger picture of history, and I think the bigger picture of history is jaundiced. It's a series of lies. It's a series of exclusions. We don't get everybody should be taught history from a kind of richly global perspective in schools, as opposed to victor and loser. The great wars and the poor. And it doesn't inform us in any way. There's nothing to learn from that unless you're the power broker, because the poor are just the poor. They just suffer, and the argument may be resign yourself to it, because that's the subtext, it seems to me, as opposed to saying we've got a strong trade union background, self-learning, working on the farms, women were far more independent, and all that stuff, as opposed to this mythologies of frailty and so on that surround us. So I think there's a real problem with the history that we have. I think it's contaminated. I think that what we have is a history that is full of subtext. An easy example, where we're now, and I think this comes back to a point earlier on by Clayton, we're now in a very unique point in time where the statues are being questioned. What's the history behind this statue? And for many of us, we probably didn't give a damn. It's like, oh, that's just somebody else's story, walk past, no problem to us. And then all of a sudden, it begins to pick up speed. Rhodes, campaign in South Africa, what's this about, And people start to say, let's question stuff. I mean, that's what history is about. It should be about us questioning whose interpretation we're working to. Who gains from this story? But then you look at it more closely, you see all these statues around the world being built in a given period when particularly in the UK, when the wealth in the UK is completely driven by the 400 years of slavery and ownership of the land. It's not just the slavery, hey, we're free, but so who owns the land? The person that was a slave owner beforehand. It's bizarre. And that ownership runs to today. So I think it's important that, and it's Africa, it's the Caribbean, it's Asia, it's South America. It's not just Africa. The world was exploited to make the West rich. That's could be on one hand, we said it's history. That's back in those days. But one of the things we discovered very recently, thanks to David Olasonga's research, is that the payment to the slave owners only finished in 2015. Yeah. So the whole of the British population have been paying the rich for owning slaves. Yeah. So there's a real issue here. There's a real issue here that we have got bad history. We've got wrong history, and we've got corrupt history, because this notion, therefore, that this great generation made money out of their brilliant ingenuity is false. They made money because they were so rich they can afford to have thinking space, good food, and a lovely mansion house in the country. Hello, what does that mean after 200 years? The poor were still poor in the UK. The women were still put in the workhouses in the UK. We had corruption and we had wickedness all over the place in anybody's language. So I think history is really important, but I don't expect to discover the true story at one time. I think it's a journey you go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you I think that's the thing for actually uncovering Robert Wedderburn's experience, is that I didn't really like history at school. I kind of it was just numbers that I memorized, and I just kind of didn't have any interest. But starting to look at, like you were saying, about who's written the history and how it's been manipulated and what is the truth behind it and how do we find the truth from it, suddenly it becomes really interesting psychologically. So I've become more engaged in history since I've had this project put on my lap, which I've found very inspiring. And how about you, Clayton? What do you feel with history and what you're doing at the moment?
You know what? When I was younger, I went to mostly a white English school, came from an ethnic BME background. I ended up being sports captain, what was it called? Head boy of the year. And when I was looking at Black history, I was thinking to myself, why did I never teach Black history? And as I got older, I thought to myself, why is there so much racism, not specifically, but mostly against Black people? There must be a reason behind this. And then when I started looking at Africa and I realized how much stuff we had in Africa, I said, this is where it's come from. Diamonds, copper, coffee, oil. So when I started to realize, okay, this is why a lot of Black people kind of hate it. It's kind of, as Dave was saying, it's kind of divide and conquer. That's why I look at it. Basically, it's divide and conquer. So for me, when I realized that, I've always said people, my best education was the YouTube. Because whatever I put in YouTube, it comes up. If I'm going to put something about this, put something about that, it comes up. Regardless of truth or not, it will give you an answer. So for me, I think, and then I watched Black Wall Street was a great thing while I watched as well about Black Wall Street. That was great. So for me, I think you always have to ask, my thing is that you always have to ask the reason, why is it the way it is? And really look into it. From my point of view, I was thinking to myself, well, this is not just a UK thing, this is a national thing. But when I started to look at Africa, as I mentioned earlier, and I realized the resources what we have, that's when I realized now, okay, this is why history is the way it is. And in a way, it kind of gave me the confidence than disillusion me, if I'm honest to. It made me want to do more stuff because now I realized the resources was mostly in Africa. So in a way, it's kind of boosted me up quite a lot. I don't watch anything kind of negative or anything about like roots or anything like that. I watch everything what inspires me to try and get to the next level. But I'm also realized that when you start using race and you start using class and race and stuff, people don't want to have that conversation. So as I mentioned before, I have to always think 2 steps ahead. For example, if I go to a meeting and we're talking about quality and we're talking about diversity, I never talk about BAME, BME people first. Because if I mention that, I know the conversation will be shut down straight away. So what I might talk about is bottom up LGBT community, women, equality that way. And then the conversation is more likely to be adapted, more open as well. So through the ways I've learned tricks and trades to talk about quality and diversity and trying to bring everybody together. Because I believe that the thing about when we're talking about quality and diversity and Black Lives Matter stuff, it brings us together, but also divides people as well. And the reason why I think that is because some people just don't understand the history of what we're trying to do as Black Lives Matters. And I'm honest to you, I've had this conversation because I'm quite open. And I've talked to many of my white friends and they say to me, is Black Lives Matter so much? Why are there so much black on black crime? So from that point of view, I had to kind of discuss like the Jim Crow. Well, obviously, I don't know if anyone really knows about the Jim Crow, when it's kind of divide Black people by light skin, dark skin. But that's the kind of conversations I like having, because I feel like what we need to do is have real talk, yeah? And talk about things generally real with some people minds to unite people, to bring people together. We're currently working on a broadcast, Street to Boardroom, and hopefully look into that next year. It's called Less Talk, but Real Talk. So that's about having a conversation like on a one-to-one with your friend or your neighbor or your family, but would it generally talk that in public? Because I feel a lot of times we have things on our mind that we want to discuss, but we feel uncomfortable. We don't know the right manners to use or the right words to use. And I think until we can start being open to ourselves and start thinking, you know what? I made a mistake. Yeah. I remember someone said to me a while ago that I hate Black people. And I was saying to him, why? But I said, you don't hate Black people because you're listening to Black music. You're just doing that to make me angry. And he was quite stunned when I said that to him. Because I was thinking to myself, you actually listen to Black music? And he says, yeah. So a lot of times I think generally we need to have these open conversations, because I think if we keep talking about the same thing about history stuff, it's great. But I feel like isolates people as well, not actually bring people together. So I think it's all about being open and really having conversations that you have a one-to-one with your friend, with your family, but with it generally talking in public, really. So that's why I see it going.
Yeah. So you're talking about the power of story, sharing stories.
Definitely, but it's got to be authentic.
Yeah.
It's got to be authentic. It's got to be honest. People will have to feel comfortable. If someone says coloured, people have to realise they can't be offensive. You have to understand somebody's history, where they've come from, yeah? If someone's been brought around racism, that's all they know. So you can't be angry for them if that's all they know. So for me, I want to know the person's story, what makes the person who they are. You know, I had a friend recently, and he was talking to me, a quick one. We had a friend recently, and an Asian friend of mine, and he was talking to my white colleague, and I was there, and he was talking about Britain's no opportunities, and he was mentioning about the mosque. He's trying to do a mosque, and we was all three of us discussing this, and I said to him, you know what? Britain has got its problems as well, but it's one of the open countries as well. You can do a mosque in Britain if you really wanted to. But I said, how many people can do a Christian church in India? And he was quite surprised with that. I knew my white colleague wanted to talk about that, but he felt comfortable. So I talked to it on his behalf. So what I'm trying to say to you, we need to come to the stage where we think, you know what, we can say what's on our mind and people don't get offensive with it. And I'll be honest, Peter, this year, I've been more open and been authentic and honest in the last 2 years, 3 years, and it's created more opportunity than
Yeah.
ever before.
People dying for authenticity, aren't they?
I've been to meetings, I've been on board, I'm on a board of the UWE in Bristol. I sit on an economics board in Bristol now, and it's all been authentic. I've even said to my interviews, I go, do you want me to tell you the truth, or do you want me to tell you one ear? And literally it's open doors, because people think, you know what, this is one ear. Because everybody's thinking the same thing, but no one has the courage to actually say it. And until we can get to that point where we can be honest, authentic, that's how we unite everybody and bring everybody together. That's what I see.
Thank you. Yeah. And Danny, how do you feel with
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what has been said. Why do I think history is important? I suppose we're at a critical point in time, and I think the psychological health of our nation requires us to be a little bit more comprehensive in our view of British history, and because we are British people, and I suppose, you know, and that's why it relates to all of us, and I think that if we actually look at the history and the way that people, not just British history, I suppose, world history and the human history, actually, you know, that we are a nomadic species. We have left Africa 19,000 years ago and then returned to Africa. We've moved all around the world, and survived. And so in effect, if we only focus, as David said, on the victors and the losers, and reinforce the subtext of oppression, imperialism, and elitism, we basically we are repeating the same history, you know, and things that, you know, I mean, you talk about black on black violence, you know, white on white violence is seen as a sort of positive thing, you know, world wars, and or ignored or humanized, whereas so it's the human story really that I'm interested in, and how our cultural stories intersect, how our history intersects, and they're all great stories. I mean, if you look at, you know, if we were to study, for example, even just Chinese history in schools, you know, it really is fascinating, and it does teach us so much about what it means to be a human being, what it means to be alive. And I just think, you know, there's just way too much focus, certainly in this country, despite the fact that Britain had, you know, taken control over much of the world, we still only really focus in schools on the Tudors, the Great Friar of London, and only recently the abolitionist slavery, but never actually the abolitionists or the journey towards that. The working classes are completely ignored, and it just, I think that this allows us to stay in the same place as we were hundreds of years ago, and allows us to excuse the transgressions of people like Boris Johnson, because they had the right sounding voice, and they fit into that narrative that we've been told, that these are the people who you should trust regardless of what they do, and so we just end up repeating the same thing. And I just hope that my kids, our kids, don't sort of grow up going through the same sort of sense of disconnection. I would call myself British, but I wouldn't call myself English, and I think that's a big shame, because that is, I am English. I was born here. My parents are Ghanaian, but and there's there are so many aspects of English history or British history which intersect with my Ghanaian history, and I'd like to know those links and share them with people and celebrate them. The good and the bad. It takes away blame as well. It stops being a story of blame. You did this to us, or we did that to you. It becomes human history. It becomes world history. It becomes history that we all share, and knowledge is power. I absolutely agree with what Chioma said. So I think it's inherent upon us as at this particular time to, it's a responsibility for us all to know more and to share more and to celebrate more of our history, because it will save us in the end, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about being British. I used to identify myself as British until I lived in Wales, and they're like, no, there's no British. We're Welsh and you are English. Let's just make that really clear. So and it was funny, I was in a chip shop once, and it was quite a ethnically mixed chip shop. And so I was thinking, yeah, I'm in near Tiger Bay type area, and they're watching England play football, and I thought, I don't really know much about football. I'll engage in, and then I stepped back and I was like, no, they were actually Irish and African mix in there, and Arab, and they're going, oh, the English and us Welsh, we don't. I was like, oh, I better step out of here. It was just interesting how in different groups of history, how they hold their stories, and suddenly how I got defined as other when I thought I was in my own community. So it was interesting. So I just make sure I didn't speak too much, because I said I had a posh accent. So,
but our stories though are rich and really varied. I mean, we've got so many stories that aren't being told. We've got so many stories that are just about everyday lives. They don't have to be spectacular. We can't all be super heroes and unique individuals. We've just got good ordinary stories of people of integrity, dignity, and some people who've lost the plot. But we have that human mix. You don't see any of that on our screens. You don't see any of that, in our storybooks to any great extent. Obviously, there are writers out there producing some books, but the prevailing landscape we're absent from. It's as if we're invisible. It's as if we have no worth, and that to me is part of the crime. The crime isn't necessarily just about the issue of our histories. The crime is what enables powerful institutions to think it's okay to wipe out a chunk of the world's stories as if they have no value and no worth. That's what I think is really evil, because it then means that we are thrown into the terrain where we have to scamper around to find time to make our own stories and hope that somebody will find it and remember it, that it's out there. Do you know, this research you guys are doing into Peter Wedderburn's great, but how will school kids know it's there? Who will nudge them to say, you know, there was a Black presence? Because it's not in the curriculum. The curriculum says we're not here. Curriculum says we're only slaves. We turn up at that point. You might get Mary Seacole, you might get somebody else, but we're invisible in the school curriculum. We're invisible on TV shows. We get Americans. I really have a serious issue. Here's a declaration of bias. I'm tired of Black Americans superseding us as if their story is our story. Tired.
Yeah.
We have 300 languages in this country from around the world. And what do we get? Americanism. I mean, really, I'm tired of it. That does not give us a sense in which the richness that is in the UK is talked about.
And it's
interracial, cultural, the whole spectrum not talked about.
But I think it's really funny how people are always saying, oh, you know, you say this happened, where's the proof? Show me the book, show me this. But then when you do happen to find some evidence, they don't want to read it, or they say, oh, you know, that's not important, that didn't happen during this. So I'm thinking, what exactly do you want? Like, what do you need? You're telling me that you need facts, you need stats, you need evidence of photos and this, and you find it and you collate it, or you ask people, you share stories, and they tell you, you know, full on accounts. And then suddenly that isn't good enough. Oh, well, that doesn't really fit with what I've been told. So
the reason why this happens, I'll tell you why this happens a lot of times, because a lot of people don't think you'll get the information. And now you've got information, it's hard to say yes or no. That society we live in. British people, British culture, we find it very hard to say no. We say maybe, not the right time, come back in 6 months. We very say no. So what people do, usually, they give you a task or a question and they think that you won't get the information. But once you've got the information, then they have to tell you yes or no. So usually that's happening. So what we need to do is start doing accountability. You need to put people on accountability to make stuff happen. You say you want to do a program, what type of program are you looking for? When are you looking to the program, and what's your budget? That way you get the person's name and number, you get that in an email, and then you obviously use that for your advantage if that doesn't happen. Because I realized that early in my career that a lot of it was talk. Some people want to change and some people don't. There's some people who want change, but some people don't know what's going on. There's some people who know what's going on, but don't know how to make change. And there's some people who know what's going on and don't want change. And what you need to do is find out the right people who support your mission, obviously what you're talking about now, to move forward. And the only way you can do that is give people accountability. Because that way you can work with the people who are serious about helping you to do what you move forward, and you'll find out the people want. So that way, instead of having loads of meetings, because we all probably can relate to this, we've had loads of meetings in our jobs and our careers, and we end up talking about the same old thing from the previous meeting. I think we're at the stage now, as I mentioned, I think we're definitely in the stage for change. Regard you like or not, change is happening, I believe, truly believe that, because I can see the young generations are looking at stuff differently. And when you look at the young generation, there's a lot of mixed couples, mixed relationships as well. So change is definitely coming. And I think if you've been in the position when you've had power, you know that you're losing power. They might not say that, you might not see that in magazines, but they know they're losing power. And I think change is definitely coming. So to answer your question, I think generally you just got to make people accountability for it and move forward that way. And then you'll realize which people are serious a lot, and then you move forward. I find out, for me personally, I'll be honest with you, I find out a lot of women support me more than anyone else. And the reason why I say that is because they've gone through the issue of, we've gone through the issue of race, they've gone through the issue of gender. So there's a mutual understanding where I'm coming from. You might not understand what it's like to be Black, but you understand how it's like to be a woman trying to get into senior management role. So straight away, I know for a fact, to get anything done is more likely than a white man will support me more to achieve this. I'm not saying that they don't, but for my career, and I can understand that we're both going through the same issues. She's gone on gender base, I've gone on race base. There's a relationship of understanding what it feels like to be the underdog or someone has to be given the opportunity. And I think once you start running that, then you know to kind of put your energy into the right places who you're working with. And then you find out that things move very faster than it would than feeling frustrated. Because I was similar to you, I was very frustrated. And then I started to work this out and I started to say, okay, this works like that. And now it's so easy to put your energy in the right places. So to answer your question, I think you just got to be quite honest and authentic. And then you find out the real people who want to support you, and then you find out the people who don't. The ones who really want to support you wouldn't take that offensive. And the ones who don't want to support you probably will take it offensive. And I think just putting your energy into those type of people who really want to help you, really.
Yeah, I think it's like building the right relationships and understanding what relationships takes you forward is really important to move in any kind of business, isn't it? To get your strategy right. So I was wondering if we open up to if anyone wants to ask any questions in the group that are watching now. I'm seeing if I unmute people, if I'm going to have a microphone nightmare, or if it works. So let's have a look. So is there anybody out there that would like to engage in the conversation at all? Would you like to unmute yourself?
Myself. Hello.
Hello.
Well,
Hi, I'm Natalia. I'm joined with Catherine. My mum just texted, go on, Nat, because she knows that I want to say something.
I recognize you two.
Oh, yes. You may have seen me on YouTube.
Oh, yes, you're the famous person.
No, I don't have a particular question, but I do think that these discussions are really relevant. I just wanted to say that it's super important, I think, to have these types of discussions. I think I think it's important when looking for allies or people to be on your side with these discussions. I think it's important for people to understand intersectionality. I wanted to just bring that up as well, maybe, and maybe ask your thoughts on that. I think Clayton was saying, about finding people who maybe white women might be used to giving help or understanding what it's like to be a minority group. But I think it's important, I think, to find the people who understand intersectionality as well, because sometimes, historically, sometimes what has been seen is that once one minority group gets invited in, then it's like, okay, bye, see you later to the rest of them. And so with intersectionality, we're able to see that, there's so many various identities and underrepresented identities. And as we're trying to,
I agree.
History and move forward, understanding everyone's different perspective is going to help us, I think. That's what
I agree. Just kind of to answer kind of that question. I think I agree with you 100%, but I realized also to open a few doors, you kind of have to have the right representative. For example, I'm trying to get Street to Boardroom. We're trying to partnership with NatWest Bank at the moment. NatWest Bank as Entrepreneur Sparks. Now I've got a white corporate guy who deals with that side for Street to Boardroom for me. Now, really, the bank industry knows Street to Boardroom, but if I'm honest to you, they're betting on Simon more than Street to Boardroom, if that makes sense, because they have a relationship with Simon. So what I'm trying to say to you, I agree we need to have these conversations, but I also realize that it needs certain type of people to open the door first to have that conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
like institutions like banks and stuff.
Yeah. So, as you're saying that, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Nat.
I agree.
Is there anybody else that would like to have a question or chat? Oh, we got Louise.
Yeah, I just want to say from a white girl's point of view that we as white people are sometimes totally unaware of what is going on for you guys, and it kind of appalls me. And I think what's good about what we're doing with this play is we're bringing it to the attention of other white people who may not know that history, may not know what people go through in this country. And I think it's really, really important that we hammer it home to them to make them aware of this, so that our education system can start to integrate this into schools, so that children are aware. And I know with my children, as you said before, Clayton, race is nothing to them. They don't even think about it. But it's just really important that we have this integration now, and that white people are aware of what's happened in the past and how we can improve things in this country. So I think this is a really positive thing that we're putting out there, and I just hope that this play goes international so that we can just speak to audiences everywhere about it.
Well, thank you very much, Louise. Is there anybody else that would like to have a chat? Oh, yeah, Pat, can you unmute yourself? Can you put your microphone on? I think if you press the microphone.
You can do it because you're the host, so I think you can unmute anyone.
Yeah, I think you can do it, Peter, on your side of the one, right? So
Okay, let's have a look.
yeah, she's
Yeah.
mic's off.
Oh, there. Okay.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why the button wasn't working. I'm sort of kind of in the background here in Stroud. My connection is with Mary Louise and Mary Lou, and through the dance theatre piece that's being created now. But just by coincidence, I have a son in Seattle who has an American African wife, and I have 2 grandchildren of mixed race. And so this is my first real experience of being able to kind of open up my understanding of what it means to have this kind of opportunity to look at Black history and all the things you've been talking about. It's wonderful because I've been so ignorant. I mean, my daughter-in-law, not so long ago, when I mentioned the Commonwealth, I didn't understand why she nearly hit the ceiling. Yeah, she sort of was outraged. And she sent me a book called Warmth of Other Suns, which was all about the great migration north from the south of North America. And I had no idea. I had pictures in my head which related to my impoverished educational background in history and my terrible GCSE history. So I am so thrilled to be involved with this, and all the stuff that's coming out from the media at the moment on television. They're doing a lot, aren't they, in this Black History Month, which is really so important. So anyhow, it's just a comment to say, hey, I'm on board. This is great for me anyhow.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, yeah, Mary Lou.
Oh, yeah. Just wanted to say, I feel really quite humbled sitting here, actually, seeing this happen and just thinking about the start of the journey of the project. And when I met Peter and he was given this academic text about Robert Wedderburn and how that grew into a performance piece, and how that performance piece has grown into something that we're working on now, and a part of that being this discussion. And you know, why did I feel that I wanted to make this happen and push this story and produce this work? And I was very tuned into that program that I think someone mentioned, the Black and British Forgotten History series. And I was sitting watching that, and our project bid had sort of been written, but due to COVID, it kind of took a tumble and stopped, and everything kind of was held for a while. And then I watched this program, and I think it was when I saw the records of the compensation that was paid to the slave owners. I felt such terrible shame, actually. And I was very moved, and I just knew that I had to pick up the phone to Sarah, who's here, and just get on it and do something. And I didn't know that, it was if I had a, white mum from the Cotswolds, if that was something that I could do. And but I'm definitely a doer. I'm a doer.
You're a human being.
I'm a human being, yeah, thank you. And ever since I was little, I've always had a huge empathy, and I don't understand a lot about things in this world. I don't understand the hatred. I don't understand the suffering and the cruelty, and I just, I am someone with a big heart, and I think that's the only thing that was driving this, really, this heart of mine that just wants to make things happen, regardless of your race, your colour, your background, your status, So that's what I wanted to say. And thank you for all being here. It means a lot to me and Peter and the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I wanted to add something to that, because I think when we talk about the so for a long time, I suppose not many people knew about the reparations that were made to the slave owners, and that we only stopped paying them in 2015.
Wow.
People didn't know that, and were sort of and are horrified by the fact that we are still paying that. Similarly, that France has been taxing Haiti since independence. With Toussaint Louverture, who was the first person to gain independence of a former European colony, I guess, with the slave rebellions in Haiti, but they were charged a tithe, and which has kept Haiti in poverty ever since. But they were charged at the tithe that they have still been paying. I think they're still paying it to France, a debt for being independent. So this sort of this level of exploitation continues. But then the other side of when you look at the slave trade and Britain's involvement in it, the way that it was sort of actually constructed in Britain, and if we were given that sort of in-depth sort of understanding of what the slave trade meant to the British economy, you can understand on some levels why they needed to reimburse the slave owners for the loss of their human chattel, because the economy would have collapsed. What's questionable is why it continued beyond abolition and into the present day, and that the descendants of slaves are paying for the for their own freedom. Those are the things that sort of, and then also this question of even an apology or an acknowledgement that it was something that was wrong, and what you do about that. In actual fact, what we should be talking about, and I know it's a very, very touchy subject, is reparations to the former countries who have suffered under these sorts of under slavery, under colonialism. And I'm sure some people will have a problem with that, but it has to work in reverse in order to create a sense of equality. And I think that's something that I think really, there's a brilliant talk which I can send to you, Peter, of somebody who's explaining why it's necessary to support the people who have been abused in history. But it's with greater knowledge that we're able to unpick it, and it stops necessarily being about I mentioned before, blame, this idea that this is like you were saying, Mary Lou, it becomes a human issue. It becomes about how we can support each other as human beings, you know, and create equality and justice. And at the moment, we don't seem to be able to take that argument seriously or to the next level. And just on the other subject of why history is important, you know, that after the colonial, during the sort of 50s and between the 50s and the 70s, most African countries became independent. And when the British and the European powers, well, certainly the British, but when all of these European powers are leaving these countries that they had sort of literally sort of taken everything from, and allowing them to sort of, you know, govern themselves, the British government burnt the records of the colonial, the sort of official records that they had in terms of what their dealings in the countries that they were leaving. So they were very aware of how important information and history was and is, and I think it's really important that we kind of take note of that, you know, as you know, the masses, you know, apparently it only takes 2% of the country to govern and to keep the system that we live under going. So, you know, you only need to educate 2% of really educate, you know, in terms of Eton and Oxbridge, and, you know, and the rest of us really don't need to be educated at all. In fact, if you educate the masses, then you end up with revolutions. And so that's probably why we still live in a state of ignorance. But I'm hoping that with greater knowledge, we can create more justice. That's you know, and fairness. You know, it's all fair and well to be talking about, you know, reversing the circumstances that many people, the inequality that we have in our world, in our country. You know, you watch a man being sort of lynched on YouTube. You know, that's what I call the George Floyd killing, is a public lynching, and you watch that and you think, well, why is that happening? And the reason that is happening is because we are still ignorant of what that serves. What does that serve? You know, the mass incarceration of people from African backgrounds across the whole of the Western world is in service to an idea and a concept that these lives don't matter. These lives are and I think that our ignorance only reinforces that. So it's all fair and well to talk about equality, but I think you have to be sort of quite active and becoming educated about what is actually going on and what has happened is the only way really to have that understanding and then do something about it.
Yeah. I think that's an important point to make, and I'm hoping just these small type of discussions that we're having right now, they drip away at the system, and we share these stories and we share our passions and our inspirations, and through this dripping kind of almost dripping campaign that's going on through these stories, that we start to expand and change the paradigm that is holding itself. These outdated kind of dogmas that need to be kind of shifted. So I'd just like to say thank you for everybody for joining in and listening in and engaging in the conversation. It's been for me, it's been a very rich experience, and just like to thank all the speakers for coming in, and just to make clear, Louise is the oboe player in the piece, and Mary Lou is producing the piece at the moment. So just thank you for everyone for joining in, and who knows, maybe do something like this again one day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, brilliant. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you,
Thanks, Lauren.
Peter. Take care, Evan.
Yeah.